It was one of those gray, rainy afternoons in Los Angeles where the sky seems to weigh heavy on the city. The rain wasn't a storm, just a constant, droning wash that turned the streets into mirrors of neon and gray. Inside a small, quiet McDonald's on the outskirts of the city, the air smelled like frying oil and old coffee. It was warm, and the windows were streaked with droplets of water, blurring the world outside into a smudge of color. Keanu pushed open the glass door, a bell chiming softly above him. He wasn't wearing his usual motorcycle gear today. Instead, he had on a simple dark hoodie, a worn-out leather jacket, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He looked like any other tired person trying to escape the rain. He kept his head down, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, not looking for recognition or fame. He just wanted a hot cup of coffee and a quiet corner where he could sit for 10 minutes and breathe. He walked up to the counter. The young employee behind the register was busy wiping down the surface, looking a little bored. When he looked up, his eyes widened slightly. He did a double take, staring at the man under the cap. Keanu offered a small, polite smile and held up a hand. "Just a black coffee, please," Keanu said softly. His voice was rough and quiet. "Large." The kid blinked, realizing he was actually face to face with the movie star, but he respectfully kept his cool. He nodded quickly and punched in the order. Keanu paid with a crumpled $5 bill, told the kid to keep the change, and took his cup. The warmth of the cardboard felt good against his cold fingers. He turned away from the counter, scanning the room for a place to hide. The restaurant was mostly empty. There was an older woman in the corner typing on a laptop and a couple of teenagers near the restrooms laughing loudly. Near the back, however, in a booth tucked away from the main lights, sat a man and a young boy. Keanu didn't think much of them at first. He just wanted to sit down. He chose a booth that was a few tables away, diagonal to them. He slid in, the vinyl squeaking under him, and placed his coffee on the table. He let out a long sigh, feeling the tension of the day leave his shoulders. For a moment, he just watched the rain race down the window. But as he sat there, sipping the hot, bitter coffee, the quiet atmosphere of the place started to feel off. It wasn't the noise of the teenagers or the smell of the food. It was a feeling, a heaviness that seemed to radiate from the booth nearby. Keanu found himself glancing over the rim of his cup. The man was big, wearing a thick gray coat that looked too warm for the rainy weather. He had a backpack on the seat next to him, big and bulky, and he kept his arm draped over it possessively. He was hunched over his phone, his thumb scrolling aggressively, his jaw tight. He looked nervous, like someone waiting for something bad to happen. Opposite him sat the boy. He looked tiny in comparison to the large man. He couldn't have been more than 7 years old. He had messy blonde hair and wore a t-shirt that was a size too small. The bright yellow wrapper of a Happy Meal sat on the table in front of him, unopened. The boy wasn't playing with the toy that likely sat inside, and he wasn't eating his fries. He was just sitting there, perfectly still, staring at the scratches in the table's laminate surface. Keanu watched them for a moment, forgetting about his script. He saw the man suddenly reach out and smack the table hard with his hand. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet restaurant. "Eat," the man growled. He didn't look at the boy, his eyes were still glued to his phone screen. "Just eat it. We don't have all day." The boy flinched violently. It was a small, sad movement, pulling his shoulders up to his ears as if trying to make himself disappear. His hands shook a little as he reached for a French fry, but he didn't put it in his mouth. He just held it, his knuckles white. Something tightened in Keanu's chest. He was a gentle soul by nature, and seeing a child scared always bothered him. He told himself it wasn't his business. Parents got frustrated. People had bad days. But as he took another sip of coffee, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was different. There was a darkness there. He looked at the boy again. The child had lifted his head slightly, turning it toward the rain-streaked window. In the reflection of the glass, Keanu could see the boy's eyes. They weren't the eyes of a kid who was just being told to finish his lunch. They were wide, red-rimmed, and filled with a pure, silent terror. The boy looked like a trapped animal. Then, the boy turned his head. He looked away from the window and his gaze locked directly onto Keanu. Keanu froze. He expected the boy to look confused, or maybe to recognize him and smile. Kids usually smiled when they saw him. But this boy didn't smile. His face was pale, his lips pressed together so thin they had almost disappeared. He stared at Keanu with an intensity that made the actor's heart beat faster. It was a look of desperate pleading. It was the look of someone sending a signal they were terrified to send. Keanu felt a sudden drop in his stomach, the same feeling he got when a motorcycle slide started on wet pavement. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. He slowly lowered his coffee cup, his eyes never leaving the child. He saw the boy glance quickly at the man next to him to make sure he wasn't watching. The man was still absorbed in his phone, grumbling something under his breath, completely unaware of the silent conversation happening across the table. The boy looked back at Keanu. He didn't speak, but his eyes screamed. He looked at Keanu's jacket, then at his face, and then slowly, almost imperceptibly, he slid a few inches closer to the edge of the booth. He wasn't trying to leave. He was trying to get closer to Keanu. The air in the McDonald's seemed to thicken, becoming hard to breathe. The rain outside hammered harder against the glass, matching the sudden pounding of Keanu's heart. He knew something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. The boy wasn't just acting shy. He was trying to tell him something without making a sound. And for the first time in years, Keanu Reeves felt truly afraid, not for himself, but for the small child sitting 7 feet away. The silence in that corner of the McDonald's felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm, even though the rain outside was just a steady, gray drizzle. Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He tried to go back to his coffee, tried to look out the window and let his mind wander, but his eyes kept snapping back to the booth across from him. The man in the gray coat was getting more agitated by the second. He was typing furiously on his phone now, his thick knuckles white against the black screen. Every few seconds, he would mutter a curse word under his breath, loud enough that Keanu could hear the low, angry buzz of his voice. The big backpack was still right there, pressed against the man's side, his arm draped over it like a protective shield. He wasn't guarding a treasure, though, it looked more like he was guarding a secret. Then, the man's phone pinged loudly, a sharp, digital sound that made the boy jump in his seat. The man swore loudly, "Damn it!" and shoved his chair back to stand up. He turned his back to the table, digging into his pocket for something, looking out the window as he waited for a call to connect. It was the only opening the boy had. Keanu watched, mesmerized, as the child moved. It wasn't the normal, bouncy way a kid moves in a play place or a fast food restaurant. The boy slid out of the booth with zero sound, like a ghost. He didn't look at his food. He didn't look at the man. He looked straight at Keanu with a desperate, intense focus. He was wearing sneakers that were a little too big, and he shuffled his feet carefully to avoid squeaking them on the tiled floor. For a second, Keanu felt his body relax. He told himself, "Okay, here it comes. The kid knows who I am." He saw that look of recognition in the boy's eyes earlier. He prepared himself for the interaction. He was used to it. He was ready to put on a smile, to sign a napkin, to shake a hand, to be the cool guy that a kid wanted to meet. It was the part of the job he actually liked, making someone's day a little brighter. He straightened his back a bit and leaned his elbows on the table, trying to look open and friendly. He even pushed his coffee cup to the side to clear a space. He expected the boy to come up with a shy smile, maybe holding a toy or a piece of paper, eyes wide with excitement to meet the guy from the movies. But as the boy got closer, Keanu's smile froze. The boy wasn't smiling. He wasn't excited. His face was deadly serious, pale as a sheet, and his eyes were swimming with tears that he was fighting hard to hold back. He looked terrified, not in the way a kid is scared of the dark, but in a deep, shaking way that adults get when things go wrong. He walked right up to the edge of Keanu's booth, standing just a few feet away. "Hey, buddy," Keanu started softly. He kept his voice low, trying not to spook him. "Are you okay?" The boy didn't answer. He just stood there, clutching his hands together in front of his chest. His knuckles were red. He looked over his shoulder quickly, checking on the man. The man was still by the window, yelling into his phone about someone being late. The boy looked back at Keanu and leaned in. He didn't ask for an autograph. He didn't ask for a selfie. He didn't even say he liked the Matrix movies. He stepped closer until he was almost touching the table, invading Keanu's personal space, but the actor didn't pull away. He leaned in too, instinctively lowering his head to hear the small, trembling voice. For a moment, there was just the sound of the rain tapping against the glass and the hum of the refrigerator case behind the counter. Keanu looked into the boy's eyes and saw a plea so raw it made his stomach hurt. The boy opened his mouth, his lips barely moving. "Please," the boy whispered, so quietly that Keanu had to strain his ears. "You have to help me." Keanu furrowed his brow, confused. "Help you? What's wrong?" he whispered back. The boy's eyes darted to the man again, then snapped back to Keanu. The fear in them was palpable, a physical thing that passed between them. The boy took a deep, shaky breath. He leaned in until his mouth was right next to Keanu's ear. The smell of the boy's shampoo mixed with the smell of the greasy air. "Don't look at him," the boy breathed, his voice shaking so hard it almost cracked. "Don't look right now, or he'll see. But he has a gun in his bag." "I saw it." Keanu felt the blood drain from his face. His heart, which had been beating steadily, suddenly skipped a beat and then slammed against his ribs like a trapped bird. A gun here? It sounded impossible. This was just a Tuesday lunch in a burger joint. Guns were things in movies, things he fought with on set, not things that 7-year-olds whispered about in McDonald's. But looking at the boy's face, he knew it wasn't a joke. You couldn't fake that kind of fear. The boy wasn't done. He pressed his hands against the edge of the table, his fingers digging into the laminate. He said, "If I tried to run or if I talked to anyone, he would shoot me," the boy continued, the tears finally spilling over and tracking down his dirty cheeks. "And he's going to take me away forever. He says we are going to a place where nobody finds us." Keanu sat there, paralyzed for a split second. The warm, safe feeling of the restaurant was gone, replaced instantly by a cold, Sharp danger. This wasn't a fan encounter. This was a life or death situation dropped right into his lap. He looked past the boy, toward the man by the window. The man was still turned away, but he was starting to turn back, his phone call ending. Keanu's instincts took over. He didn't panic. Years of training for stunts, years of keeping cool in chaotic situations on film sets, kicked in. His face went from shock to calm in a heartbeat, though his insides were twisting. He knew he had to protect this kid. "Okay," Keanu whispered back, his voice steady and strong, the kind of voice you use to tell someone everything is going to be all right. "Okay, look at me. Just look at me." He reached out and gently put a hand on the boy's shoulder. The kid flinched at the touch, terrified, but then leaned into it, desperate for comfort. Keanu could feel the small boy trembling under his palm. "I believe you," Keanu said, his eyes locking onto the boy's. "You are doing great. You are so brave. But you have to listen to me very carefully. Go back and sit down," Keanu whispered, keeping his eyes locked on the boy's face. His voice was incredibly low, a rough rumble that barely reached the child's ears. "Do not look at me again. Just eat your fries. Act like nothing happened." The boy looked terrified, his lower lip quivering. He wanted to stay next to Keanu, wanted to grab onto the man's arm and hide behind his leather jacket. But he also knew the man with the gun was watching. "Be brave," Keanu said, squeezing the boy's shoulder one last time before letting go. "I'm going to handle it. I promise." The boy took a shaky breath, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, and turned around. He walked back to the booth, his small shoulders hunched forward as if he was carrying the weight of the world. Keanu watched him go, his heart hammering against his ribs so hard he could hear a rushing sound in his ears. It felt like there was a block of ice sitting in the bottom of his stomach. As the boy slid back into his seat, the man by the window ended his call. He abruptly turned around, his movements sharp and aggressive. He looked at the boy, then his eyes darted suspiciously toward Keanu. Keanu forced himself to look away, staring down at the lid of his coffee cup as if it was the most interesting thing in the world. He picked up the cup, taking a slow, deliberate sip, though his hand felt unsteady. "What were you doing?" the man demanded of the boy. His voice was loud, cutting through the quiet restaurant. The boy jumped again, nearly knocking his soda over. "Nothing," he stammered, his voice high and weak. Just stretching." The man glared at him, then looked over at Keanu again. Keanu could feel the man's gaze burning into the side of his head. This was the moment. If the man realized they had spoken, if he saw the fear in the boy's eyes, he might panic. And a man with a gun who panics is the most dangerous thing in the world. Keanu slowly turned his head. He didn't look at the man with fear, though. He put on a look of tired annoyance, the kind of look you give someone when they are being too loud in a public place. He raised an eyebrow at the man, then casually looked away, out the window at the rain. It was a move he had done in a dozen movies, acting like he didn't care, acting like he wasn't a threat. The man seemed to buy it. He grunted, dismissing Keanu as just some random guy drinking coffee. He sat back down heavily, making the booth cushions groan. He reached over, grabbed one of the boy's fries, and crammed it into his mouth, his eyes shifting around the room like a wild animal checking for traps. "Keep eating," the man muttered to the boy. "We leave in 5 minutes." 5 minutes. The time limit hung in the air like a ticking clock. Keanu knew he had to act fast, but he also had to be smart. He couldn't just stand up and yell, that man has a gun. If he did, the man could grab the boy, use him as a shield, or start shooting before anyone could react. The restaurant was full of innocent people, the teenagers in the back, the woman on her laptop. He had to get them out without triggering a disaster. He reached into his jacket pocket. His fingers brushed against his phone. Usually, taking out a phone was a mindless action, something people did 100 times a day. But now, it felt like he was defusing a bomb. Every move had to be calculated. He pulled the phone out slowly, keeping it low under the level of the table. He didn't want the screen lighting up his face. He glanced at the man. The man was busy looking at a receipt, sorting through the mess of wrappers on the table. He seemed agitated, bouncing his leg nervously. The backpack was still right there, unzipped slightly. Keanu caught a glimpse of something black and metallic inside the main pocket. It was just a flash, a glint of metal under the fluorescent lights, but it was enough to confirm the boy's terrified whisper. It was real. Keanu felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. This wasn't a scene. There was no director yelling cut. There was no stunt double to take the hit. This was real life, and a child's life was in danger. He looked down at his phone. His hands were trembling just enough to make typing difficult. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. He thought about the boy's face, the absolute terror in his eyes. He thought about the man saying he was going to take the boy away forever. That thought pushed away the fear and replaced it with a steely determination. He unlocked the phone and tapped the screen. 9-1-1. His thumb hovered over the green call button. He looked around the restaurant one more time, memorizing the exits. The front door was too close to the man. If the police came in that way, the man would see them immediately. The side door near the restrooms was further away. He needed to tell the dispatcher exactly where to go. He pressed the button. He brought the phone up to his ear, but he kept his head down, his elbow on the table, shielding his mouth with his hand. To anyone passing by, it looked like he was having a private conversation, maybe complaining to a friend about the weather. The line rang once. Twice. It felt like an eternity. On the third ring, a calm, professional voice answered. 911, what is your emergency? Keanu kept his voice to a whisper. He spoke fast but clearly, every word chosen carefully. I'm at the McDonald's on Santa Monica and Lincoln. The one near the laundromat. Sir, what is the nature of the emergency? The dispatcher asked. There is a man in the back booth, Keanu whispered, his eyes flicking up to check the man. The man was still distracted, wiping grease off his fingers. Gray coat, large build. He has a backpack. There is a gun in the bag. He has a child with him, a little boy. The boy says the man is going to take him. There was a pause on the line, a moment of surprise that the dispatcher quickly masked. Sir, are you sure? I saw the weapon, Keanu lied, just a little, to make them hurry. And the boy is terrified. The man is agitated. He said they are leaving in 5 minutes. Okay, sir, the dispatcher said, and Keanu could hear the sound of typing in the background. I need you to stay on the line with me. Do not let him know you are on the phone. Police are being dispatched now. Do not engage the man. I won't, Keanu whispered. Just hurry. Please. He lowered the phone slightly but kept it connected, pressing it tight against his leg under the table. He looked up. The man had finished his fries. He zipped up the backpack with a harsh, grating sound zip that made the boy flinch. The man stood up, throwing the backpack over one shoulder. He reached out and grabbed the boy by the upper arm, his grip looking tight and painful. "Let's go," the man barked. Keanu's heart stopped. They were moving. The police weren't there yet. He watched in horror as the man began to drag the boy toward the side exit. If they got out that door, into an alley or a waiting car, they would be gone. The boy would be gone forever. Keanu knew he couldn't just let them walk out, but he also knew he couldn't physically stop a man with a gun without getting them both killed. He needed to stall them. He needed to buy time. He stood up. It wasn't a rush, it wasn't a charge. He just stood up, blocking the aisle slightly between the tables and the exit. "Excuse me," Keanu said, raising his voice just enough to be heard. His tone was polite, but loud. "Hey, excuse me, sir." The man stopped, annoyed. He turned to look at Keanu, his hand twitching dangerously close to the zipper of the bag. "What?" he snapped. "What do you want?" Keanu looked him in the eye, his face calm, a mask of friendly indifference. "You dropped this," Keanu said, gesturing to an empty wrapper on the floor near the man's feet. It was a lie, but it was a distraction. It was the only card he had left to play. The man in the gray coat didn't even look at the wrapper on the floor. He kept his eyes locked on Keanu, his gaze narrowing into a suspicious squint. The air between them felt electric, like the static before a lightning strike. The man's hand, which had been hovering near the zipper of the backpack, now gripped the strap so tightly his knuckles turned white. He wasn't buying the distraction. Not for a second. "I didn't drop anything," the man growled. His voice was low and gravelly, vibrating with menace. He took a step forward, invading Keanu's personal space, trying to intimidate him. "Move out of the way." Keanu didn't move. He could feel his heart pounding against his ribs like a drum, but he forced his face to stay calm. He kept his hands loose at his sides, making sure the man could see they were empty. He knew that if he stepped aside now, the man would drag the boy out that door, and they would disappear into the gray afternoon. "I think you dropped this," Keanu said again, nodding toward the floor, keeping his voice level and friendly, like he was talking to a neighbor. "It's just trash, man. Don't leave a mess." The man's face twisted in anger. He clearly didn't care about the trash. He cared about the delay. He looked past Keanu toward the exit, then back at the table where they had been sitting. He was nervous. He was sweating, despite the cool air in the restaurant. "Are you deaf?" the man snapped. He jerked the boy's arm, pulling the child closer to him. The boy let out a small, pained cry, but the man ignored him. "I said, move. We're leaving." The boy looked up at Keanu, his eyes wide and pleading. There was silent communication in that glance, a desperate hope that Keanu wouldn't let go. Keanu saw the tears mixing with the dirt on the boy's cheek. It broke his heart, but it also steeled his resolve. He couldn't let this happen. "Whoa, take it easy," Keanu said, raising one hand slightly, palm out, in a calming gesture. "You don't have to be rough with him. Look, the kid looks sick. He's pale. Maybe he should sit down for a minute." The man froze. He seemed confused by Keanu's concern. He wasn't used to strangers interfering, especially not strangers who looked calm and unafraid. "He's fine," the man barked. "None of your business." "It is my business when you're dragging a kid through a restaurant like that," Keanu said. He took a small step closer, placing himself firmly between the man and the door. It was a dangerous gamble. He was putting himself directly in the line of fire if the man decided to use the weapon. But he knew he had to keep the man's attention on him, and only him. "Why don't you let him go sit down? I'll buy him a drink. A water, or something." "I don't want a drink," the boy whispered, his voice shaking. It was barely audible, but the man heard it. "Shut up," the man hissed, shaking the boy again. Just then, a faint sound pierced the quiet of the restaurant. It was a siren, far away in the distance, but distinct. Woo-oh-oh, woo-oh-oh. The reaction was instant. The man's head snapped toward the window, his eyes wide with panic. His body went rigid. He knew that sound. He knew what it meant. He looked back at Keanu, his suspicion turning into pure, cold hatred. "You," the man whispered, his voice trembling with rage. "You did something." Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't deny it. He just stood there, solid as a rock. "I haven't done anything," Keanu said, his voice dropping lower, serious now. "But you need to let the boy go." The siren grew louder. It wasn't just one siren anymore, it was a chorus of them, wailing in the distance, getting closer fast. The sound bounced off the wet streets outside, filling the McDonald's with an eerie, rising urgency. The other customers in the restaurant were starting to notice. The teenagers had stopped laughing. The woman with the laptop had taken her headphones off. They were looking around, confused, sensing the danger in the air. The man's breathing became heavy and ragged. He looked at the door, then at Keanu blocking his way, then back at the bag on his shoulder. His hand slowly moved toward the zipper of the backpack, twitching with nervous energy. "Get back!" the man yelled, his voice cracking. He shoved the boy behind him, using the small child as a shield. "Get away from me!" Keanu saw the hand on the bag. He knew the gun was inside. He knew that if that zipper came down, things were going to get very bad, very fast. His phone was still pressed against his leg, the 911 dispatcher listening in on the open line. He prayed they could hear the man's shout. Okay, Keanu said, taking a slow step back, his hands raising higher in surrender. He wanted to de-escalate, to give the police that one extra second they needed. "I'm backing up. See, I'm moving." But the man was too far gone. Panic had taken over his brain. He wasn't thinking anymore, he was just reacting to the closing walls of the trap. "You think you're a hero?" the man spat, his face red. "You think you can stop me?" "I don't want to stop you," Keanu lied, his eyes never leaving the backpack. "I just want everyone to be safe." Outside, the screech of tires pierced the air. The sirens were deafening now, screaming right outside the building. Blue and red lights began to flash through the rain-streaked windows, illuminating the restaurant in a chaotic, strobing light. The colors danced across the tables, across the man's terrified face, and across the boy's tear-streaked eyes. The man jerked his head toward the window. "No, no, no," he muttered, the words tumbling out of his mouth like a chant. He looked like a trapped animal that realized the cage door was already shut. The front glass doors of the McDonald's didn't open. Instead, Keanu saw movement through the side window near the restrooms. Two officers in uniform were creeping along the wall, guns drawn, moving with practiced precision. They had come in quietly, blocking the other exit. They were inside. Keanu knew they were there. The man didn't. The man was still staring at the front door, waiting for the police to burst through that way. He was completely exposed to the officers coming from behind. "Drop the bag." The command didn't come from the front. It came from the side, loud and authoritative, echoing through the restaurant like a gunshot. The man spun around, his eyes bulging. He saw the two officers standing near the bathrooms, their weapons raised and pointed directly at his chest. He froze. His hand was still gripping the backpack strap, hovering halfway to the zipper. The muscles in his arm twitched, fighting the urge to reach for the gun. "I said drop the bag." The officer shouted again, stepping closer. "Let the boy go. Do it now." The restaurant was dead silent. The only sound was the heavy, wet breathing of the man and the distant wail of the sirens outside. The boy stood frozen behind the man, looking smaller than ever. Keanu was standing a few feet away, his hands still up, his eyes focused entirely on the child. "Let him go," Keanu said softly, his voice cutting through the tension. It wasn't a shout, just a quiet plea. "It's over. Just let him go." The man looked at the officers, then at the guns, then at Keanu. The fight drained out of him all at once. His shoulders slumped. He looked at the floor, defeated. Slowly, agonizingly, he loosened his grip on the boy's arm. The boy didn't wait. As soon as the grip loosened, he ducked away from the man and scrambled toward Keanu. He didn't run to the police. He ran to the only person in the room who had promised to help him. Keanu immediately dropped to one knee, opening his arms, and caught the boy as he collided with his chest, burying his face in Keanu's jacket. The officers surged forward, grabbing the man by the arms and slamming him face first onto the table, twisting his arms behind his back to handcuff him. They shouted commands, securing the weapon, clearing the scene. But Keanu didn't watch any of that. He just held onto the trembling boy, wrapping his leather jacket around the small, fragile frame, shielding him from the chaos, whispering, "You're safe now. I've got you. You're safe." The noise in the restaurant was chaotic and overwhelming, filled with the shouts of police officers, the clatter of equipment, and the man's muffled curses as he was pressed against the table. But inside the small circle of Keanu's arms, the world was quiet. The boy was sobbing, his small body shaking so hard that Keanu could feel the vibrations rattling through his own chest. Keanu stayed on one knee, ignoring the cold floor, completely focused on the child. He kept one hand on the back of the boy's head, pressing the boy's face gently into his shoulder, shielding him from the scary scene of the arrest. He didn't say anything heroic. He didn't say anything at all. He just made a low, humming sound, a deep vibration in his throat meant to soothe, like the sound of a running engine or a warm heater. "It's okay," Keanu whispered finally, when the boy's sobbing slowed down just a little. "You're safe now. Look at me." The boy pulled back slightly. His face was blotchy and red, his eyes swollen from crying. He looked terrified, glancing over at the police officers who were now handcuffing the man. The man was screaming now, yelling that it was a mistake, that they had the wrong guy, but the officers ignored him, efficiently snapping the metal cuffs onto his wrists. Keanu gently turned the boy's face away from the man. "Don't look at him," Keanu said softly. "He can't hurt you anymore. He's never going to hurt you again." A female police officer, her face kind but serious, approached them slowly. She didn't want to spook the boy any further. She knelt down beside Keanu. "Sir," she said to Keanu, nodding respectfully. "I need to check on the little guy. Are you okay, son?" The boy looked at the officer, then back at Keanu. He tightened his grip on Keanu's jacket sleeve. Keanu looked at the officer and gave a tiny nod, giving her permission. "It's all right," Keanu told the boy. "She's here to help. She's a good guy." The boy reluctantly let go of Keanu's jacket but stayed close to his leg, leaning against him for support. The officer checked the boy over, looking for injuries. She saw the red mark on his arm where the man had grabbed him, a nasty, bruising grip print. She frowned angrily but kept her voice gentle. "You're very brave," the officer told the boy, taking a small notepad from her pocket. "What's your name?" While the officer began the difficult task of trying to find out who the boy was and where he belonged, Keanu stood up slowly. His knees popped a little as he rose. The adrenaline that had been pumping through his veins was starting to fade, leaving him feeling shaky and a little lightheaded. He ran a hand through his hair, letting out a long breath he felt like he'd been holding for hours. More officers had arrived, along with paramedics. The restaurant was buzzing with activity. Customers were being questioned by other officers. The man in the gray coat was being marched out the door, his head down, surrounded by police. One of the officers held the backpack open just as they reached the door. Keanu saw it again, the black metal of the gun nestled inside with some snacks and a coil of rope. Seeing it sent a fresh wave of cold reality through him. It hadn't been a bluff. That man had really intended to take that child away forever. The manager of the McDonald's came over, looking flustered and worried. He offered Keanu a fresh coffee, apologizing for the mess, clearly realizing who his customer was. Keanu politely waved him off. He didn't want a free coffee. He didn't want thanks. He just wanted to know the boy was going to be okay. He watched as a paramedic gently placed a blanket around the boy's shoulders. The boy looked small and swallowed up by the yellow fabric, sitting on a chair near the register, swinging his feet nervously. But when the boy looked up and saw Keanu watching him, the fear in his eyes evaporated. It was replaced by a look of pure hero worship. It was the look a kid gives when they realize they've been saved from a monster. The boy whispered something to the police officer. She nodded and smiled, then pointed at Keanu. The boy hopped off the chair and ran over to Keanu, ignoring the paramedic for a second. Keanu crouched down again so he was eye level with the child. "Thank you," the boy whispered. His voice was raspy from crying. "I knew you would help. You're him. From the movies." Keanu smiled, a genuine, warm smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Yeah, I'm me," he said softly. "But today, I was just a guy having a coffee. You were the brave one. You told me what was wrong. That's why we're safe. You saved yourself, okay, never forget that." The boy looked at him, processing this. He nodded slowly. "Okay. You're going to go with these officers now," Keanu said, gesturing to the nice female officer who was waiting patiently. "They are going to take you to get some good food, maybe a burger that's actually hot, and they're going to find your family." "I don't want to go," the boy said, grabbing Keanu's hand. "I know," Keanu said, squeezing the small hand back. "But you have to. You're going to be okay. I promise." The officer stepped forward and gently took the boy's other hand. "Come on, sweetie. Let's get you something warm to drink." The boy looked at Keanu one last time, memorizing his face, then let the officer lead him away toward the back of the restaurant where the ambulances were waiting. Keanu watched them go until the swinging doors closed behind them. The immediate crisis was over. The boy was safe. The bad guy was in jail. The police were starting to pack up their scene. But Keanu didn't feel like celebrating. He felt drained. The weight of what could have happened sat heavy on him. Another officer, a tall man with a sergeant's badge, walked over to him. He held a clipboard in his hand. "Mr. Reeves," the officer said, "we're going to need a formal statement from you about what you saw and heard." "I know it's been a lot." Keanu nodded. "Of course. Anything I can do." He spent the next 20 minutes answering questions. He explained about the whisper, the fear in the boy's eyes, the distraction with the rapper. He kept the details simple, focusing only on the facts. He didn't try to make himself sound smart or brave. He just told them the truth. When he was done, the sergeant thanked him profusely. "You did a hell of a thing today, son," the sergeant said, extending his hand. "If you hadn't noticed that kid, we don't want to think about what would have happened." Keanu shook his hand firmly. "I was just in the right place at the right time," he said, deflecting the praise. "Just make sure that kid gets a good dinner on the city tonight, okay?" "We will," the sergeant promised. Keanu realized that people were starting to pull out their phones. A few teenagers near the door were whispering and pointing. The shock was wearing off, and the realization that a celebrity was involved was setting in. Flashbulbs might start popping soon. The press might be outside. He wasn't ready for that. He didn't want a photo op. This wasn't a movie premiere. This was a tragedy that had barely been averted. He didn't want to be the face of it, he just wanted to go home and process it. "Is there anything else?" Keanu asked the officer. "No, you're free to go. We'll be in touch if we need anything else." Keanu nodded. He picked up his motorcycle helmet from the booth where he had left it. He looked around the McDonald's one last time. It looked different now. The lights seemed too bright, the silence too heavy. He could almost still see the ghost of the terrified boy sitting in the corner booth. He pulled the collar of his jacket up higher around his neck. He didn't look at the crowd near the door. He didn't wave. He walked quickly toward the side exit, the one the police had used earlier. He pushed the door open and stepped out into the cool evening air. The rain had stopped, leaving the city wet and glistening under the streetlights. The air smelled fresh, washing away the smell of grease and fear. Keanu took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the cold oxygen. He walked over to where his motorcycle was parked, a dark shadow against the curb. He put his helmet on, securing the strap. The world became muffled and quiet again, contained inside the helmet. He climbed onto the bike and tucked the key into the ignition. He sat there for a moment, gripping the handlebars, his hands still trembling slightly. He thought about the boy. He hoped the officer was right. He hoped the boy would find his way home to a warm bed and a family who loved him. He hoped the memory of the man with the gun would fade, replaced by the knowledge that he had stood up for himself. Keanu kicked the engine to life. The powerful motor rumbled beneath him, a steady, familiar heartbeat. He revved the engine once, the sound echoing off the brick buildings of the alley. He didn't look back at the McDonald's. He didn't look toward the police cars still flashing their lights out front. He just looked forward, put his bike in gear, and accelerated out of the alley. He merged onto the wet street, disappearing into the flow of traffic, becoming just another pair of red tail lights fading into the distance of the vast, sprawling city. He wasn't a hero on a screen anymore, he was just a man riding home, carrying the memory of a whisper that saved a life.